Hello, we are Chloe and Mila, and today we are going to present you the theme of opposites in the light between oceans.
Right and wrong can be like bloody snakes. So tangled up you can't tell which is which until you shut them both, and then it's too late. This quote, taken from chapter 20 of The Light Between Oceans, written by Stedman in 2014, reveals the complexity of life particularly emphasized in this novel. Indeed, the author depicts the tragic story of Tom and Isabel, a young loving couple living in an isolated lighthouse, unable to have a child, who miraculously find an abandoned baby on the island's shore, taking care of the little girl as their own, thus triggering a terrible chain of consequences. In that way, the novel allows us to explore numerous and opposite visions of life and reality. Therefore, one may wonder to what extent do the themes of opposite pervade the story of The Light Between Oceans. In an attempt to answer this question, we will first analyze the contrast between the main characters of the novel. Then we will explore the diverse opposed notions which are particularly important in this story. Finally, we will shed a light on the dilemmas and conflicts of values tormenting the various characters.
To begin with, The Light Between Oceans provides a wide range of diverse characters with complex and opposed personalities and values. Indeed, we can notice a strong opposition between the two main protagonists, Isabel and Tom, who can therefore be considered as foiled characters. As a matter of fact, while Tom is characterized by his wisdom, calm nature, and rational thinking, Isabel's characterization emphasizes her particularly fierce, impulsive, and emotional personality. Moreover, they are also different concerning their values and perception of life, based on their education and past experiences. On the one hand, Tom, highly traumatized by war, is haunted by his past and feels profoundly guilty for surviving and what he has been forced to do. Indeed, on chapter 3, while Louis expresses his awe to meet a war hero, Tom minimizes his action through the euphemism, "A bit of grass doesn't make anyone a hero," showcasing the deep psychological impact of war and the extent of Tom's survival guilt. Due to his experiences and traumas, he has a highly realistic, almost pessimistic vision of life and mindset, particularly underlined during his encounter with Isabel at the beginning of their relationship, asserting that, "Well, don't get confused between a thing itself and the first time you come across it. Think it over. I'll bet all the tea in China that in 12 months you'll have forgotten all about me." On the other hand, Isabel is a very young and inexperienced woman who bases her decisions and perception of reality on her instincts, feelings, and emotions. Furthermore, Isabel and Tom have a very different education and relationship with their families, as Isabel has grown up in a religious background and is very close to her parents compared to Tom, whose mother left when he was a child and who has a very tense relationship with his strict father. These differences explain the different decisions they took throughout the story, particularly exemplified with the argument about their rights and legitimacy to keep Lucy. Thereby, Tom and Isabel can be considered as foil and opposed characters due to their different characterization, education, values, and decision-making.
Moreover, Lucy's mothers, Hannah and Isabel, are also extremely opposed characters. Indeed, while Hannah is the real biological mother of Lucy Grace, Isabel can be considered as her foster mother, attached to the child by emotional links rather than biological ones. As a consequence, they have different perceptions of the child, as Hannah seems to be the natural legitimate mother of baby Grace, while Isabel has educated and taken care of Lucy during her first childhood years. As Hannah said, "This isn't my Grace, her baby had died after all." The possessive "my" and the exclamation mark expresses Hannah's despair concerning the rejection of her own child, as well as underlining the opposition between Lucy and Grace, and thus Isabel and Hannah. In addition to that, the contrast between the two characters is threatened by the fact that Isabel's happiness seems to generate Hannah's suffering and pain, and vice versa, creating a strong tension and opposition between these two women based on their conflict of interest, particularly highlighted by the quote in chapter 31, "She will never see that woman again as long as I live, never," asserted by Hannah to Gwen, her sister. Here, Hannah's hate and resentment towards Isabel is evidenced by the repetition of never, the exclamation mark, and the vague and derogatory expression "that woman," highlighting her profound anger. This conflict of interest between these two characters is even more emphasized by Tom's dilemmas, torn between his love for his wife and daughter and his will of doing the right thing. However, despite the strong opposition between them, they both care for Lucy Grace and want to ensure her well-being. They are also linked by the notion of isolation, even though Hannah's rejection is more based on discrimination and racism, while Isabel's isolation is physical as she lives on a remote island. Consequently, these two characters are strongly opposed, even if they possess some similarities.
Finally, we can consider that there is also an important contrast between the characterization of Lucy and Grace. Indeed, while Grace is the child's first identity and linked to the family of Hannah, the Ronfelds, Lucy is her second identity and is symbolically linked to Tom, Isabel, the Sherborne, and her life on the lighthouse, illustrated by Lucy's surname, Lulu Lighthouse. This identity crisis pervades the text and is even more reinforced in the scene when people are seeking for the child who has fled Hannah's home, looking for the lighthouse. Both Lucy and Grace fill the air, though only one child is lost. This antithesis expresses the child's loss of landmarks, confusion and tearing between two mothers' lives and identities. Therefore, Septimus's choice to name the child Lucy Grace at the end of the novel symbolizes the child's rebirth, healing, and the beginning of a new life without denying any part of her past and identity, perfectly transcribed by the novel's title, The Light, therefore Lucy, Between Oceans.
Subsequently, the contrasted characters in The Light Between Oceans allow the reader to explore a wide range of opposite notions and themes. Indeed, the notions of life and death are ubiquitous in this story, both playing a major role in the character's life. As a matter of fact, this dichotomy is particularly expressed through the war trauma affecting multiple characters, especially Tom, in this post-war society. Effectively, the author evokes the terrible damages and traumas caused by World War I for the whole Partagers community compared to a Swiss cheese full of holes, especially in chapter 2 when the author presents this community. This chapter transcribes the deep suffering engendered by war, as numerous people have lost a loved one, as evoked with the euphemism and negation, which told you that the boy was well wasn't, as well as the ironical war memorials, dwelling not on the loss but on what the loss had won and what a fine thing it was to be victorious. Even more reinforced by the oxymoron, victorious and dead is a post-thought of victory. The opposition between life and death is also strengthened by the important survival guilt felt by Tom and other war veterans. Moreover, the arrival of Lucy on the island shore sheds a light on these constructed notions, as her father was found dead while she has been able to survive, reinforcing the paradoxical, miraculous aspect of the scene, as well as reminding the reader the fragility of life, threatened by an unpredictable death. Thereby, Lucy also seems to reinsufflate life and hope into the Sherborne and Greymarks families. Indeed, she allows Isabel to recover from her traumatic miscarriages, to bring back joy into Tom's life, healing him from his war traumas, entertaining and ravishing Bill and Violet after the dramatic loss of their son, and permitting Hannah to regain hope and start a new life as well as her family. As expressed by Isabel, the boy had healed so many lives, not only hers and Tom's, but now the lives of these two people who had been so resigned to loss, evoking her parents' healing from their son's losses. Lucy is therefore the light which brings back life into the void and trauma left by death, enabling the characters to rebirth.
Additionally, the opposition between the community life experienced by the characters in Partagers and the peculiar isolation of Isabel and Tom is also a predominant theme in the plot. Indeed, while visiting the Partagers community, the reader can notice an important peer pressure, forcing the characters to adapt and to submit themselves to the norms imposed by this community. Effectively, we can notice the important pressure caused by the constant gossip that is spread all the time by the diverse members of the community, such as Hilda and Ralph, intruding on the intimacy of others' lives. As a matter of fact, Hannah is often considered and referred to as crazy and unable to heal from her grief by the members of Partage's community. This peer pressure is emphasized by the discrimination and racism Frank suffered from, particularly evident in chapter 17 and 15, when Hilda and Ralph tell Frank's tragic story to Isabel and Tom. In this passage, the reader can understand the extent and the terrible consequences of racism, reinforced by war trauma, as he is rejected by the whole community because of his Austrian origins. As Ralph said through this derogatory assertion, they took against him because he was German or as good as. On the contrary, the isolated life experienced by Tom and Isabel on the island, freed of social norms and pressure, also reveals the difficulties and negative effects of isolation on one's life and moral values. Indeed, Tom and Isabel do not seem to comprehend the consequences of their actions while deciding to keep Lucy, generating a terrible chain of consequences. Moreover, this isolation allows these characters to reinvent their own norms and rules in their own separate world and reality, particularly exemplified by Isabel's appropriation of the island, desire to keep Lucy, and Tom's warning to follow some rules in order to keep danger and menace away, saying that there is something you have to do to survive on the offshore light, to stay normal, eat at proper times, keep your clubber on. Consequently, the opposite notions of community life and isolation pervade the text, especially revealing their negative consequences.
Finally, the themes of past and future are also particularly emphasized throughout the novel, thus revealing the psychological traumas of the characters. Effectively, Tom expresses the difficulty to move forward, to anticipate and visualize the future, as he is profoundly haunted by war's memories and delusional, thus anchoring him in the past. Therefore, respecting the rules and the repetitive practical lifestyle and work on the lighthouse allows him to focus his mind on the present, something solid, and to reject his traumatic past as expressed by Tom through the enumeration. You don't think ahead in years or months, you think about this hour and maybe the next. Anything else is speculation. In that way, the opposition of past and future, particularly emphasized by the non-chronological plot, reveals the terrible traumas caused by war, impacting the character's conception and relation with time.
Additionally, the novel makes us question our perception, definition, and conception of numerous contrasted values, highlighted by the characters' actions and dilemmas, sometimes leading to moral conflicts. As a matter of fact, the notions of right and wrong pervade the text, revealing both the contrasted aspect of these values and the difficulty to distinguish one from the other. Indeed, these moral values differ depending on the characters' personalities, experiences, and perceptions of an event, thus triggering a terrible chain of consequences as well as numerous conflicts, both internal and between the characters. This idea is particularly exemplified by Isabel and Tom's choice to keep Lucy after having found her in a shipwrecked dinghy, leading to a tense argument between them. On the one hand, Tom, profoundly traumatized by war and a disrupted childhood, always seeks to do the right thing and to obsessively respect the rules, seen as a way to heal from trauma and to redeem himself from his previous actions. Therefore wants to declare having found the baby in the dinghy and to eventually try to adopt her in a formal way. On the other hand, Isabel, an impulsive young lady, having undergone numerous miscarriages, feeling herself immediately attached to the baby, wanting to give her love and shelter, tries to convince Tom to keep the baby as if it were their own. Thus, from Isabel's point of view, they've done nothing wrong except give shelter to a helpless baby. However, as these notions seem to sometimes be intertwined, the novel underlines the fact that something right can generate devastating consequences, and vice versa, expressed by Tom and Isabel's doubts and guilt, as well as Hannah's psychological state and resentment. Thereby, Hannah is described as terribly affected by the couple's choice, not knowing about her baby and husband's survival, as transcribed by Hilda's tragic assertion. Poor Hannah never recovered, revealing the dramatic consequences of their choices. In that way, the reader can realize that right and wrong moral values guiding our decision-making are above all subjective, altered and shaped by various factors.
Consequently, the dichotomy of right and wrong also emphasizes the importance and the strong oppositions between the notions of crime and redemption, particularly ubiquitous throughout the novel. Indeed, Isabel's and Tom's unlawful action, deciding to keep and raise Lucy as their own child, can be justified by their tragic past experiences and rightful purpose to save the little girl, as well as the incredible amount of love and tenderness they both provided to Hannah's daughter, as expressed by the antithesis, "Tell her we loved her, even though we didn't have the right." However, the extent of Hannah's suffering and despair also makes the reader understand her resentment towards the couple. Nevertheless, the complexity of the situation, Tom and Isabel's good intentions and remorse, make both Hannah and the reader call into question their judgment on these characters' actions. Indeed, through the antithesis, she accepts the gift that life has sent her, and she accepts the burdens on chapter 18. The author reveals the weight of the lie. This guilt is even more reinforced by Tom's dilemma, as the more Lucy grows, the more Tom's guilt and uneasiness seem to affect him, explaining the letter he sent to Hannah, strengthening the tension and rupture between him and Isabel. However, Tom's sacrifice and confessions to the police can be seen as a way to redeem himself, to make Isabel and Hannah forgive him, as well as forgiving himself, as well as expressed in his letter to Isabel, "I couldn't live with myself," or the antithesis, he cannot reconcile the grief he feels at what he has done and the profound relief that runs through him on chapter 25. In that way, Isabel's confession at the end of the novel could also be considered as a way to both display her forgiveness and confess her actions in order to redeem herself, having had to choose between hatred and regret, between the man and the child. Thus, the profound grief for this child and guilt for their actions, metaphorically compared by Isabel to a pain that has no location and no pain, or Sergeant Nucky's assertion that Tom and Isabel will be imprisoned for the rest of their life, in a form of psychological prison, reveals the extent of their pain, remorse, and will for redemption and forgiveness. This idea is even more reinforced by Isabel's worry concerning God's forgiving, before her death asking, "What if God doesn't forgive me?" which Tom's respond to, "God forgave you years ago. It's about time you did too," transcribing her profound guilt and desire for redemption.
Finally, Hannah's claim for clemency, allowing Tom and Isabel to suffer from a significant lighter punishment, remembering about Frank's antithesis, "You only have to forgive once, to resent you have to do it all day, every day," can also be considered as a form of redemption, as well as the beginning of a reconciliation, completed by the final reunion between Tom and Lucy Grace at the end of the novel. Consequently, the theme of justice, linked with the notions of crime and redemption, pervade the text, making the reader realize the complexity of moral values and the beauty of forgiveness. To conclude, the theme of opposites is ubiquitous throughout the novel, in the form of contrasted characters, notions, or values, allowing the reader to get a grasp of the complexity of life, transcribing its diversity, breadth, and making the reader experience a wide range of strong human experiences and emotions, thus contributing to transform The Light Between Oceans into a deeply moving and enriching novel. As a matter of fact, through a devastating and tragic story, the author underlines the ambivalence of life in a final form of opposition, and it proposes an inspiring message of hope, transcribed by the very last sentence of the novel. He watches the ocean surrender tonight, knowing that the light will reappear. Thanks for your attention, and thank you for watching.